The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I will be your host today for the Nonprofit MBA podcast. I am co-founder of Financing Solutions. We've been in business for over 11 years, and we are the leading provider of small lines of credit to small nonprofits in the United States. If you're interested in potentially learning more about our line of credit program, which is very popular, please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Again, that's nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Today, I'm excited to be speaking with three people. It's the first time on any of my podcasts in over 300 podcasts. I've ever had three people on the podcast together, which I think is going to be fun and great. I have Mark Rothman, Matt Harris, and Jen Tomo from Walk with Sally. Mark is the acting executive director. Matt is the development director, and Jen is the program manager. Just for you guys, our listeners to know, Walk with Sally provides hope through individualized mentoring and community support services to empower children experiencing trauma through a parent, guardian, or sibling cancer journey. And having the fact that I lost my wife unexpectedly last year.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear, Stephen.
Marriage, thank you. And I have a 13-year-old son and a 22-year-old son. I know the value of having a support group. And for our listeners, the group that helped us greatly was a group called Good Grief, which is for people families that have lost their siblings, have lost siblings or spouses. So I'm a big proponent of what Mark, Matt, and Jen and their organization does. And I want to welcome all three of you to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
We're thrilled to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one quick correction. Matt's last name is Harms.
Harms. What did I say? Hams?
Harris.
That's all right.
Oh, sorry. Harms. I apologize. So, today's topic is, how a small nonprofit positions itself for the future. And so, Mark, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about, the journey of, and relating to the subject matter of how small nonprofit positions for the future, how Walk with Sally, what was your life cycle like as an organization that really made you aware of the importance of positioning yourselves?
It's a great question, Stephen. It really starts out as a response to the need. And really, it starts with the personal experience of our founder, a man named Nick Arquette, who lost his mother to cancer when he was a young man. And years go by, he had his trauma, he lived with it, and he started working with a young man at a local high school. We're in the Southern California area. And he just sort of one-on-one, he just sort of became a role model in that young man's life. And he saw the transformation that his relationship created for this young man. He went from underperforming in high school, he went from being under-socialized and not happy and really just burdened by the trauma that you, unfortunately, and your sons have experienced personally, that happens when we lose someone to cancer. And that was the seed. That was the idea that said, maybe there's something we can do. We can expand this and grow it. And then 17 years later is where we are today. Nick had been in a position where he'd been managing and running the organization for a long time. And like many of your small nonprofits, it was time for him to shift and move on to other aspects of his life and for the organization to shift and grow as well. And there's I'm an experienced nonprofit executive. I've led several organizations, particularly in the interim role. When they're transitioning this movement from a founder with great energy and passion to other leaders who have similar energy and passion, but the transition can be really difficult. And I want to talk specifically about what that means in terms of program. because one of the things that we want to do, we've been very focused in the South Bay area in Southern California, and we want to grow. And I want to sort of turn it over to you, Jen, and talk about some of the growth pains that we've overcome and that we're still experiencing, because, there still are challenges ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that the whole world was impacted by COVID, and us specifically. We had to jump in and help our families in ways we've never had before. A lot of our families couldn't afford rent, couldn't afford food, and we were able to jump in and provide that support. And one of the silver linings of the pandemic for us was that it became a virtual organization. We were able to connect with families we haven't been able to in the past. We were able to have Zoom calls with families in Santa Clarita and areas that are hours away from us. So we were able to expand organically through this new virtual world. And that kind of opened the door for us to touch more families, make more connections with partnerships, families, mentors, and really grow our organization in an organic way. That kind of jump-started the transition. And then we intentionally started looking in those areas to expand in different ways as well.
So, Mark, is the turning point in the organization for positioning yourselves? Did that inflection point happen when you came on as an executive director, transitioning from the founder to you?
Absolutely not. All of us are standing on the shoulders of our founder, who literally breathed life into this organization out of nothing. And I think I don't know enough of the history to say exactly when the inflection point was, but it was at the moment when he was able to scale it so that it wasn't just him matching children like your 13-year-old son with adults who have had their own cancer journey. And he was able to bring in a staff, and he had enough of a income stream to support a larger expanded footprint of an organization.
Yeah. Well, I think there's many inflection points in a organization. So, there's the founding of it. There's the building a staff so that the founder doesn't do everything. There's the point where you go from a small nonprofit to a large nonprofit. There's succession planning, right? There's all these inflection points inside of an organization. The interesting part, I think, is when you have an experienced person in the nonprofit sector who has been through all those phases. And then they come in and they know, oh, well, in order for us to get to this next phase, we have to go through this or this and this. And that's where experience matters. Fair enough?
I think that's true. And I think that's where we are. And that's really the sort of one of the topics we're talking about. One of the aspects of the topics we're talking about today is how does a small nonprofit transition. My job is to help shepherd the organization to its next leader who has that level of experience. For everything that Nick Arquette was able to do in founding this organization, he didn't live through all those inflection points you just talked about, Stephen. He learned as he went. And so what he was able to create was amazing, but now we need a leader to come in who has seen that kind of life cycle that you're describing.
What's the revenue of the organization right now?
Our budget's a little bit under $1 million.
$1 million. And so now that you're headed to, trying to grow the organization, go more national or at least more regional anyway, whose role does that kind of get into place? Who's really in charge of trying to decide how you're going to get there?
I think I want to turn that back to you, Jen, because it's really important that that for everything that it takes to support an organization, it's really important that we remain program focused. And I think that what you're talking about, Stephen, is really a program question.
Yeah, so for us, we were lucky enough to receive a grant that helped us create an expansion plan. So our goal is to expand in Long Beach to start and then use that expansion plan to other cities. So over the next 3 years, we're planning to just focus on Long Beach, create partnerships, recruit families, recruit mentors. And once we reach those milestones, we can start expanding into other cities.
Yeah, I tell you, there's such a correlation to the organization that I belong to in Good Grief. I'm trying to get on their board right now. I'm going to first volunteer as a facilitator. So I'll be going through 36 hours of training in order to do that. But it's interesting to see, like, the organization puts you together. Good grief, and I'm mentioning it because it correlates to what you guys are doing, and that is at first it puts you together with a group of 12 other people who are in similar circumstances as what happens, right? But honestly, what the organization didn't do a good job with was setting me up with a mentor, and so I naturally became friendly with people in the group who I really thought we could support each other outside of the organization. So it was very much a mentor situation. And that's kind of where we are right now. So I kind of wish my organization that I belong to did more mentoring like you guys are doing. So now, with me potentially going on the board, I know that they want to expand, but in this world of virtual video, right? I don't know if there's a place anymore for having to have a building and meetings all in one place. Are you guys tackling that same issue?
It's interesting, Stephen. We are on a 1 day a week policy where we're in the office together 1 day a week, and then we're remote. We're all connected, and I'm texting Matt 4 times a day, and picking up the phone and calling him just to say quick question, and we're making it work. But it also depends a little bit on the organization. It sounds like because of the groups that you described that Good Grief is managing, you do need a location for those groups to come together.
Yeah.
And I think, Jen, you'd agree that we are also back in a transition where we're transitioning back to live meetings where our mentors. Can you talk a little bit about how they want to be together physically?
Yes. So our goal is to bring the friendships together in person. However, we do leave that up to the comfortability of the families and the mentors, of course. But all of our programming is back to in person. So we meet monthly and we have fun events together. But then we also have some friendships who aren't comfortable doing that yet. So they still meet on Zoom or they talk on the phone. And then the beautiful thing is sometimes when the mentor moves away, that friendship closes. But now we're able to still facilitate that friendship and have that grow on a virtual level now.
Yeah. So Matt, I know you're the brains of the outfit because you haven't said anything. So tell me a little bit about your responsibility in a lot of this organization.
Sure. So a lot of my responsibility is focused, of course, on raising funds for the organization. We do that primarily right now through 3 events. We have an event called the Friendship Bowl. We have an event called White Light, White Night, and we have another event called Breast Friends in the fall. And within that framework, there is fundraising, individual giving, also grants, and I'm really trying to stay focused on making sure that the organization is a position to diversify its fundraising. And so we've been primarily an event focused organization where a lot of our funds come from those 3 events. And I'd love to see us get to a place where we have a focus on individual giving, where we have focus on our scholarship program, where there is a focus on building an endowment, things that will create a longer lifespan and a healthy financial situation for the organization.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 words that come to mind for me when I think of scale for a nonprofit organization. The first thing is changing how fundraising is done because it's on a completely different level, right?
Right. Absolutely.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then the second thing of scale is depth or, what's the right word? The fact that you're going regional, fact that you might go national, it's always a big picture there. But so there's kind of 2 parts. Is that fair to say those 2 things are critical when you talk about scaling an organization?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are. You're talking about, shifting your kind of the kind of mindset of an organization, and kind of shifting the way it's fundraising has been done in the past, and you're kind of shifting to something new. Whether it's you're focused on, like I said, individual giving, and really kind of building those partnerships to where you can where you do have enough revenue and can break into a regional and eventually a national organization similar to Make-A-Wish.
Yeah. So I just had a podcast yesterday on the Nonprofit MBA podcast with the topic was building a strategic plan. It wasn't the first time I've done that topic one. This one was more about engaging everybody in the strategic plan process. Let me ask you a question, and you can be blunt, and that is, how is your strategic planning? Did you see there's an inflection point? Did you see a point where it really started to be a big part of your organization where you were strategically planning? Is it still a work in progress where you still are not, you're still trying to do it, but it's not great? Or is it very advanced and you're really working on your strategic plan and you're implementing and executing on it?
It's a great question, Stephen. Nonprofits love to have strategic plans because they can be really important documents that set out what the 3 to 5 year future of the organization is going to look like. And I've done strategic plans, as a nonprofit leader as well. I think that the danger you run into is that it becomes a gorgeous document that sits in a 3-ring binder on the shelf, and nobody looks at again until 3 years later, and they say, "Oh, we better check. It's time to review it." And how have we done? I think for Walk with Sally, I think we're at the end of our strategic plan cycle. I think that we need to move through this transition, particularly in our leadership, bring in the permanent CEO. And I think that's the point where the board can take up the question of what the next 3 to 5 year strategic plan is going to look like. Well, I think in the short term, let me just add one last thought is,
sure, please.
As Matt was talking about in terms of diversifying our funding, or Jen is talking about in terms of focusing on a particular area to really learn how to do that so we can scale. Those are strategic plan steps that are happening, and they can happen without that sort of bigger cover of the strategic plan.
Yeah, I'm going to put my 2 cents in. I've done strategic plans for 25 years, and I get what you're saying. What I've learned over that 25 plus years is you want to have a 1-page strategic plan. So you can do the binder to kind of get through the exercises of everything, but you use a 1-page strategic plan summary as your working document. Because when you get what I found is when a strategic plan gets to be 8, 9, 20 pages, no one looks at it.
Exactly.
Right? But a 1-page strategic plan with your mission, your culture.
Right.
Yeah.
That can be in every board packet for every meeting. That's actually, I've never heard that idea before. It's actually a really great idea.
Well, it comes from the business world, and there's a guy by the name of Vern Harnish who's a very well-known small business consulting company, and he has, if anybody wants to Google it, it's called a 1-page strategic plan, which he copyrighted, and I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Ween Dream, which provides costumes to kids who can't afford them, and they had no strategic plan, and so I took the 1-page strategic plan and that Vern had for businesses, and I literally could use 90% of it for the organization to create their strategic plan, and and then add stuff to it. So if anyone was listening, of course, people are listening. If you're interested, Google 1-page strategic plan, and it'll come up. And it's a free document. It's really good. In fact, I think I'm going to write Vern and say, Vern, can you turn this into one for nonprofits? And but it's It's what I've used for 15 years now, and it's you can have your KPIs on there, which is key performance indicator, your culture, your mission, who you service, all these other things. It's just an idea. So
Brilliant.
it sounds like to me, is it fair to say that you haven't done a ton of strategic planning?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
think that's fair.
Yeah, and why do you think that's the case?
I think that the organization is, I think for much of the 17-year history before I came, it was a small organization where it was all hands on deck, running the organization, managing the events that Matt talked about, supporting the programming, that Jen's representing, and it was let's get this done, let's get to the end of the year, and I think, and I'm sort of projecting here. The board and I have never really talked about where their strategic plan process is.
Yeah.
Because we are in this transition year where the goal is to move to our permanent leadership. And at the same time to keep all the events and all the programming going simultaneously.
Financially, did COVID have a big impact on your organization from a program standpoint?
From a program standpoint, how would you say?
I'm aware that some of the government grants got pulled. I'm aware that a lot of the corporations that were sponsoring us moved to more of a COVID sponsorship or a Black Lives Matter sponsorship. So we had to really shift gears and re-strategize. I'm not sure the numbers side of it, but I know that the strategy definitely had to be adjusted.
Wow, that's a big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm assuming that things are starting to kind of get back to on track again, or are you having to reinvent the organization all over again?
We actually got very lucky. We were able to qualify for 2 PPP loans.
Yeah,
and we also, because our event sells tickets, we were able to apply for and obtain a SVOG, a small venue operating grants, VOG, through Small Business Administration, and those were critical to supporting us through COVID.
So. Tell me the biggest challenge that you are now facing for trying to position or reposition the organization. What's the biggest challenge you have right now?
I think, Matt, your job is our biggest challenge, meaning that
Matt or his job?
Meaning all the things, not, I said that wrong.
No,
Matt's got the biggest challenge in the organization.
Yeah.
Because as you were describing all the things you have to do,
right.
It's like you're building the plane while you're flying it. We've got to keep all of our income streams consistent, but we've got to shift away to those diversified sources of funding.
Absolutely. And also, one of the big challenges that we're facing is our event structure. The organization in the community, a lot of times is more well known for its event than it is for its mission. Our White Light, White Night event, which is a fantastic, fun, big gala that we put on every year. Our next one is August 20th. It is known as one of the premier events in the South Bay. The challenge with that is a lot of our attendees might not be aware that White Light, White Night goes to support the Walk with Sally mission. And so Mark and I and Jen and the program team have really taken that on and really tried to kind of shift that sense of purpose to make sure that the community and people in the South Bay know that White Light, White Night supports Walk with Sally, and that is what it's there for. And so that's one of the very interesting challenges that we face fundraising wise.
Yeah, the Good Grief organization that I go to, or I did go to, is I think they're $5 million. But my understanding is they actually get money from the state of New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey. I'm sure they must have got somebody's ear about the value, or maybe one of the politicians went through what I've went through, and made sure that the state, because it's for families and it's it's good. So, I mean, had Matt, have like, I know this, I give money, quite a bit to the organization, right? They send out a simple email, and at the end of the year, last year, I gave quite a bit of money. That my do you think going the route of getting big donors who have been through a terrible event, losing someone to cancer, is an opportunity for fundraising?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think that is one of the avenues to go down. I wouldn't want us to become so focused on that
Yeah.
because I could also see, having like a celebrity or having a very known name in the political world, support the organization also be an issue. I think there's a good balance there between the two, between your kind of regular individual donor who, cares for the organization, has been affected by cancer, because they're just as important, if not more so, than the celebrity. I always tell the story about the donor who gave $1 every year to an organization for 20 years. The donor passes away, and in the will, they bequest $1 million to the organization. So I always look at examples like that as being very important, and a reason why you want to not focus so much on the big donors, who are important and absolutely are essential to helping your organization grow and do well financially. But I also think that the kind of just the regular individual run of the mill donor is as important. And so I think you have to strike a balance between the two.
Yeah, but I think, my guess, is it fair to say, and I haven't done fundraising myself.
Mm-hmm.
So is it fair to say that uh, a the fundraising events will get you to $1 million in revenue, but then after that, it starts to be, you have to start looking at other avenues. Is that fair? I don't know. I'm not leading you. I just don't know.
Right. No, I think
those events are hard to run, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they are
huge staff demands.
There are huge staff demands. There are, many moving pieces, and I think, and when you rely so much on one event, for example, to be the big revenue builder for your organization, it can, really kind of lessen, like I said before, the other important aspects of fundraising, like individual giving, endowments, scholarships, things like that, things that we could potentially do. Because they are, big events are time consuming. They're staff killers. They really, you pretty much just live, sleep, and breathe, a gala event that, is designed to help you, to raise so much money to kind of get you through the rest of the year and to get you through your year. That by the time the event's over, there's no time for the other things that are important.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, there are other organizations like Walk with Sally throughout the United States that have the similar mission. Fair enough?
Absolutely.
Have you spoken to them about partnering, combining various different ways of building a bigger presence?
We've definitely met with organizations that share a similar story than us. We kind of mimic their recruitment process. We have very similar strategies in that aspect. However, we do feel like in the South Bay specifically, we are the only organization that specifically does mentorship for children who are impacted by a loved one's cancer. So we do have to create our own strategy in most aspects of the organization.
So there aren't any other organizations in the United States that you know of that do mentorship for cancer survivors? not cancer survivors, but for kids or parents who've lost a loved one for cancer? There's nothing like that out there?
So we've only focused on partnerships within California because other
Right.
national organizations have different strategies than we do.
Right.
So we haven't found a specific organization that does exactly what we're doing.
Wow. Wow. I'm really surprised. I'm really
And,
surprised.
and we see that in the partnerships that we have.
Yeah.
Like our program manager team just had a meeting with one of the local hospitals as a referral source, because obviously the hospital is going to know who's undergoing their cancer journey, and they want to provide support to their patients. And so we can fill in that. It's a tangential relationship, and we can fill in that need that
Yeah.
is not being provided by other organizations.
Well, I mean, really, the money that you raise goes to really building the internal structure of the organization, which allows you to get bigger, right? It doesn't. You have the quote unquote, I'm talking business for a second, lead generation program. Unfortunately, that's rough word, because the hospitals, like my school psychologist told me about Good Grief, so they don't have to get the word out to people, because they just get it out to the school psychologist, and the school psychologist tells everybody, right? They need it for people like, Matt, and who is running the, and Jen, and the people who are running the program inside, that you need more of them to do the work. Is that accurate to say?
Absolutely. And take it a step further, Jen, in terms of how we build.
Yeah, so the way our strategy works is we have great relationships with the counselors, the social workers in school systems. We also have great relationships with the social workers, nurses, and doctors in hospitals. So we have amazing advocates throughout the entire city that is, speaking our mission for us. So a lot of the times we get referrals directly to us instead of us creating those partnerships, on the ground. That's obviously 17 years of work where we have built that name in the South Bay specifically. So that's kind of how our partnerships work. We just kind of speak our mission to those schools, to those hospitals, to those nonprofits, and then they recruit families for us.
But talk about your outreach as well.
Yeah, so our outreach, specifically referring to,
like when you guys you'll go to
so we'll
fairs, they'll go to farmers markets.
Gotcha.
You don't spend a lot of time in the office.
Yeah, so we definitely are on the ground a lot of the times, creating those partnerships in the areas that we haven't expanded to quite yet. So yeah, we'll go to fairs, farmers markets, concerts, anywhere where we can find mass amount of people, and we'll definitely spread our mission.
So I'm going to ask this question to each of you. I think it's going to be the final question I'm going to ask. Tell me, during COVID, what you learned about either your job, your organization, anything having to do with the organization. Tell me what you learned during those challenging years, which is still challenging, but we're coming out of it, we hope, right? So we'll start off with Jen. Jen, tell me first what you've learned during that experience.
For me, it was definitely learning how to adapt. I think that we were so used to doing things a certain way, and we were forced to change the way we did things. We were forced to re-strategize, support our families in ways that we've never had to support them. And it really kind of opened our eyes to zoom out a little bit on our organization and making sure that we're creating wraparound services for our families, not just the cancer they're dealing with, but other things in their lives that we can support them with. And then also just strategizing on expanding. Like I said, that kind of jump-started our expansion. We realized that we don't have to just focus on one specific area. We have the means, even though we're a small organization, we do have the resources and the means to expand to other areas. So my answer is definitely adaptability.
Gotcha. Okay, Matt, you're up.
All right. I would say on the fundraising side of things during the pandemic and during COVID, it was creativity. The fact that you can use platforms like Zoom, like the one we're on right now, to put fundraising events on and to do the same things that you would do in person. You just transfer them over to a digital platform, but really the end result is still the same. You still have sponsorships. You can be creative with how you recognize sponsors on a podcast or on a Zoom event. So things like that, I think, were really, really fascinating, very, very eye-opening for me personally, kind of helping set those types of events up. So for me, it's definitely creativity.
Gotcha. And Mark, your experience?
I would say redesign. That it created a freedom for us to think about how we would redesign the structure of the organization, like to really sort of think outside the box. If someone came to me tomorrow and said, we need to give up the office. It's just, it's a lot of rent. We're not using it regularly. Is it mission critical to our mission? And I would be open to saying, you know what? We do so much outside the office. Our program particularly is in the homes and in the parks and in the game centers where our mentors go to be with each other, at the piers, at the beach. Whenever they're together, they're doing our program. And so I would say, let's redesign. It created for me the potential for how we could redesign an organization to create efficiency, shift funding that may be being spent in other areas over to the mission and the program where we really want it to be spent, and give us the freedom to think outside the box.
Yeah, I think every business leader is struggling with that right now, right? I mean, you don't want to blow the organization up either. It's tough because like you'd say, it's okay, well, let's try for 3 years and reevaluate it, right? And we just got to hope that Mark stays there for 3 years, right? I know you're acting director, but because it could be a real problem if the leader who made that decision actually left, and then the organization. So I think the topic of having an office, not having an office, people working remotely, not working remotely, partial remote, I think it's fascinating. I really do. I mean, and I'll tell you the story because it'll illustrate something. So 11 years ago, when my business partner and I started Financing Solutions, we were in the same office, and his office is right next to mine. And we had been friends for 15 years. So prior to that, and so he would come into my office and he'd sit down on my couch and I'd be in my chair like I am right now. And we would just, we'd like say, we'd be talking about our weekend, like what went on. And all of a sudden it would start transitioning into business ideas or new things we're doing. And, we would be there for 2.5 hours, and sometimes when we would have friends there, they said it was like watching a tennis match because your head was going back and their heads were going back and forth between the ideas that me and Keith were coming up with and what we were doing. Well, 3 or 4 years later, when it was like 5 years later, he decided to move an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And so he started working out of his house and I stayed in the office, and all those ideas went away. Mm-hmm. As easy as it is to pick up the phone, as easy it is to have a Zoom call, those impromptu meetings and ideas went away.
Yeah, no, you're right. So, that's a huge loss.
It was a huge loss. And in some regards, it wasn't bad because we already had our positioning. There's the magic word for today, right? We already knew what we're doing. All we were really doing is really just executing more. But sometimes if you have to transition and those ideas are not flowing, I think it hurt us more than helped us, honestly. Mm-hmm. But we did very well. We've done very well as an organization. But both he and I recognize how those ideas and those conversations completely went away.
Yeah.
Even much that I even tried to schedule them.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, okay, every Friday at 10 o'clock, we're going to have a brainstorm session. He hated that. He wanted it more impromptu. Right?
Planned spontaneity didn't work.
Yeah. Like for me, I like structure, so it worked well. Yeah. So anyway.
I mean, we have a committee event tonight we have a committee meeting tonight for our White Light, White Night event. We hold it live for some of the very reasons you're talking about. There are a couple of people who will Zoom in.
Yeah.
But that is the downside if we were to sort of explode the office model of what we'd be giving up.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be an interesting social experiment. I read a lot about the articles on it because I think it's a fascinating thing. I guess you could do what other people are doing, which is a hybrid model, right? You get a smaller office space. People are required to come in 2-3 days a week. That's probably where everyone's going to go. And then we'll kind of see. I mean, even the companies like Google and Amazon and Tesla are backtracking on their idea that that they're forcing people to come in anymore. So you got to keep talent, right? So that's the issue you have.
Right.
Well, it was a great discussion. I want to thank all of you for really kind of coming on today to discuss how positioning. From what I take, you can see where Walk with Sally is in the midst of deciding more about the nuts and bolts of where they kind of know where they want to go conceptually, but now I guess it comes down to figuring out and then executing on it. Is that fair to say, Mark?
Execution.
Yeah.
It's what makes Tom Brady Tom Brady.
Well, it is. It's the key, and it's the boring part. It's the boring part, but it's the most important, right?
Right.
And
so I'd like to thank when it works.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank so very much Mark Rothman, Matt Harms, and Jen Tomo from Walk with Sally for coming on today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you like today's podcast, please give us a review on your podcasting app because it really helps us get the word out. And it also is how they rank. The Nonprofit MBA podcast it's been moving up like big time. And it's because our reviews have been all 5 stars. So we really appreciate that. If you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And then, Mark, if anybody wants to get in touch with you guys, how would they go about doing that?
Walkwithsally.org is our website. And you can always reach us at info@walkwithsally.org.
Great. Thanks, you guys, for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Great conversation.
Good luck on your journey. I always end every podcast this way. I want to thank all of our listeners for doing all the hard work of making the world a better place. I know that you guys are out there doing the heavy lifting, and people like me, we have a part in that too. We all have to do our best to be better human beings. Certainly the world needs it, but you, all our listeners out there are doing it every single day, and I thank you for that. But you should make sure you take time for yourself. And, you're only as good to your organization and to your people as you are, as you take care of yourself, your health, and all that, all the other stuff that goes along with it. So get outside, smell the roses, enjoy, the time outside of your work. It'll make you better at your job. But thank you. And thank you for all listening. Everybody have a fantastic day. And it was great hearing from the 3 people today on the Nonprofit MBA podcast.